Hello and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I'm going to share with you an updated version of this quilt. This was my Valentine's quilt from last year, but I'm going to share with you how you can make this same scrappy quilt but use a tulip applique center instead of that heart applique center. For those of you who have my Speedy Solutions to Cut and Organize Your Scrap Stash Techniques book and my Patterns book, I'm sure you've got a lot of scraps ready now that you'd like to be able to use to make some beautiful quilts. And this is a great scrappy quilt. Last year I made it in pinks and grays and whites, but you can use all kinds of wonderful scraps from your stash to create this quilt. The two blocks that we used here were the Bachelor's Puzzle block. That's the block that's all the way around the quilt. The center block was the heart applique block. What I'm going to share with you today is, in fact, I'll have it in the description box below. You'll have the templates. But it's the tulip block. And I am ready for spring and the tulips to start blooming. I think you probably are too if you're anything like me. So we can substitute this tulip applique block in the center. And of course you can make this scrappy quilt as large as you want, or even a table runner if that's what you'd prefer to make. And then you can applique as many of these tulip blocks as you'd like to for your quilt. So in the description box below, you're going to see the Tulip Applique template. I'll have that information below, but these are some of the templates. It's actually a number of pages of the templates that are available for you to create that applique block. Whenever I do print these out for you, I do include the 1/4 inch seam allowance, as you'll see in the upcoming video with regard to the hearts. So if you do needle turn applique, that 1/4 inch seam allowance is there for you. But if you're doing a fusible or a glue based, just ignore that outside 1/4 inch. You'll just follow the dark solid lines as you're cutting and fusing your applique. So remember, in the description box below, you're going to get the PDF for the Bachelor in Love block. That's going to be below for you. You'll get the PDF of instructions for the heart block if you choose to use it, but I'm also going to attach the templates for the tulip block. And you'll simply use the techniques that I taught, and you'll see that in the video here on how to put this applique block together. And you'll use those same techniques for the tulips as opposed to the hearts. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I would love to see a lot of your scrappy quilts. So now I'm going to include the video for both blocks here in this tutorial. That way you'll know exactly how to put it all together. And I look forward to seeing your quilts.
So again, don't forget to print out the PDF that is attached in the description box below, or save it to your computer. Or you could even create a playlist of all of these sample blocks, or use one of my playlists so that you'll have access to it in the future. This is the block right here. It's a beautiful little block. It's made with a lot of half square triangles and 4 squares. It's made with values, lights, mediums, and darks. And this is what I teach in my Speedy Solutions to Cut and Sort Your Scrap Stash. This is a book that I have out on my website. I also have a complete lecture on how to get your scrap stash cut, sorted, organized, stored, and then how to use it. And that is out on my YouTube channel. I'll have all of these links connected in the description box below. If you don't have your scrap stash cut and sorted and organized yet so that you can use it, make sure you watch that video so that you'll have the understanding of how to do that. It's really very helpful. So here is the block that I've put together, and what it requires, and the information is on your PDF, are 3.5 inch squares and 4 inch squares. The 4 inch squares are going to be used to make my half square triangles for the block, and these 3.5 inch mediums are the actual squares that are right here. So these are the ones that I'm going to place right in those areas there. Those are the 3.5 inch mediums. And then I've pulled 4 inch lights and 4 inch mediums and darks that I'll be using to create all of the half square triangles. So let's go ahead and see how this is done. If you take a look at this, I have taken all of the 4 inch squares and I've placed them right sides together. Here I've placed 2 lights with 2 darks right sides together. I've placed 2 mediums with 2 darks right sides together, and 2 lights with 2 mediums right sides together. I'm going to be drawing a diagonal line across each one of these from point to point. I'm going to be sewing 1/4 of an inch on each side of that diagonal line. Then I'll cut it apart, square it up, press it open. I'll end up having a total of 12 half square triangle units when I'm done. I will have 4 half square triangle units of the lights and darks. I will have 4 half square triangle units of the mediums and darks, and I will have 4 of the half square triangle units of the lights and mediums. So that's how I'm going to create my half square triangles. I'll show you that in fast motion. You've seen me do this before where I cut apart my assembly line of half square triangle units by cutting straight across from edge to edge there, from stitching line to stitching line. And what that is doing is just eliminating a lot of excess fabric, so there's not quite as much bulk in the seam allowances. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and trim apart every one of these. Then I am going to cut each one of them on that diagonal line. And then I'm going to use my Clearly Perfect square up ruler to square each of them up to 3.5 inches. Every half square triangle must measure 3.5 inches. I will press to the darker side. That's what I plan to do on all of mine. So I have squared up a number of these half square triangle units. I am using my trimmer A. It's called the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, and this is what I'm using to square them up. I am doing this by just laying, these have to be 3.5 inches, and that's what they need to be squared up to. So I'm locating the 3.5 inch mark on the trimmer, and that is the stitching line right there. You'll see that. So I'm lining that stitching line up with the stitching line on the half square triangle unit here. So I've lined that up, and now what I'm going to do is just trim away the excess on each side. I didn't get this side properly. There we go. It's not a whole lot that has to come off, but it's very important that that gets removed. These must equal 3.5 inches exactly in order for your blocks to go together properly. It would be very, very frustrating if you did not trim up each and every one of these half square triangle units. So make sure you do that. Your block will then go together beautifully. I also want to point out that with the clearly slotted trimmer here, you can actually eliminate some of the excess points with these slots. They have slots available in the trimmer, so you can go ahead and trim there, and then you'll see that the excess points have been removed from that triangle. Maybe you can see it better on that side. So I have laid out my block with the half square triangle units and the squares. So the top row has a dark light half square triangle. There's a 3.5 inch medium. Here is a medium dark half square triangle, and then another dark light. And here we have a medium dark half square triangle. Here we have light medium half square triangles, and there's a 3.5 inch medium square. There's another square, the same half square triangle, light medium. Here's a medium dark. Here's some more medium or light darks, a medium dark, and another half square triangle, or excuse me, another 3.5 inch square. So it's very simple. Just follow the diagram in the PDF or on the video here to lay out your block. And then what I like to do when I put my blocks together, I like to web them. Basically what I'm going to be doing is sewing these two rows together, then I'm going to add this row, and then I'm going to add this row, then I'll sew them together in this direction. So let me do that for you. You've seen me do this before. In fact, I'll attach a link below for a video that teaches you how to web your blocks or your quilts. I also like to web my quilts when I'm putting them together. Every single block then is sewn together in the same fashion. And today I'm going to be sharing with you week number 21, which is the Hearts and Flowers Applique block. This is one of my scrappy blocks in my 52-week series. You can actually use this block with last week's block, week number 20, which was the Bachelor in Love block, to make a quilt. But for today, let's take a look to see what we need to make the beautiful Hearts and Flowers scrappy block. Don't forget to download the PDF. The PDF has the pattern for the instructions, which is for the block itself. It also has on the second page, the photo of the quilt that we'll be working on Friday. And it also has the PDF of the templates. So you want to make sure you download that PDF, save it or print it, whatever works best for you, or maybe just save the playlist so that you have all of it for future reference. Remember, when you're working with templates, there is always a 1/4 inch seam allowance that EQ8 provides for the templates. For those of you who love to do needle turn applique, if you do needle turn applique, you definitely need that 1/4 inch seam allowance. But I'm going to be showing you fusible applique, so you can ignore the 1/4 inch seam allowance and follow the dark lines. So let's take a peek here. Okay, so what I have in front of me here is the background square, and in your instructions it'll let you know that you do need to have one light background square, 12.5 inches. You want to cut it at 12.5 inches or larger. You can cut it at 13 inches and then trim it down after you've done your applique. Sometimes when there's a lot of applique, it does reduce the size of the block. So if you want to cut it at 13 inches and then we'll trim it to 12.5 when you're done, that's perfect. Also, I have 4 5-inch squares that I'm going to be using. These are mediums for my hearts. I have 1 5-inch square that I'm going to be using for the flower buds, and this is a medium. And then I have a couple of darks here. Instead of just using one dark, I'm using 2 different darks. These will be for all my leaves and the part of the flower that's underneath the bud. And this is going to be for my little stems. So those are the fabrics that I'm going to use for my flower. And what I have done is taken the templates, which, let me grab that here for you. And here they are. For these templates, you are going to need to trace 4 of the A's, which is the heart. You're going to need to trace 4 of the C's, which is the little thing underneath that flower bud. And here is the flower bud, and you need 4 of those, which is B. You'll need 4 of the stems, and you'll need 8 of the leaves. So make sure when you print this out that you're following those guidelines with the quantity that you need for each of those elements. And I've already done that. So I just took my fusible paper. This one is just a light heat and bond. I recommend a light fusible. It's just so much easier to work with and for sewing and so forth. And what I like to do is go ahead and group the elements together. So I have my hearts grouped together. I have my stems grouped together. I have my leaves grouped together. And then my buds and the little portion of the flower that's underneath the bud. So they're all grouped together, and I can loosely cut them out, and I can put them on the back of the appropriate fabric, fuse it, and then I can cut them on the line. Let me show you that. All right, so as you can see here, I have loosely cut them out in groupings that will allow me to place them on these squares quite easily and fuse them to the back. So that's the front, this is the back. We're going to fuse them to the back. And so I've got my 8 leaves on these 2 5-inch squares. And on this one, if you choose to go ahead with a different gray or dark for your stems, I just used a 3-inch square, and I've got my 4 stems right here. They're all grouped together, and I can secure them. I can press them to the back of that. That's the front. This is the wrong side, and there are the stems. And I'm going to press that on there. I'll take this over to the machine in just a minute, or to the iron. And here I have this 4 parts of the flower that are right under the bud. They are also going to be this gray, and I have them loosely cut around each element. It's very important that you keep fusible around all of the lines as you fuse it to the fabric. That will allow the fuse to adhere all the way to the very edge of each of your elements. So that's why I have loosely cut around them. And then of course I have my 4 hearts that I have loosely cut out, and that's going to be pressed onto the back of that square. And the last thing is down under here. These are the buds. So here are the buds. It's a square basically that's going to show up under this. So when you put this element with the bud, that's how it's going to look. And it'll make more sense here in a minute. This is the right side, here is the wrong side, and I've got all 4 of my buds that I'm going to press to this. So I'm going to take all of these to the iron. I'm going to press them. Follow the instructions on your fusible web, whatever it tells you. Everyone has a little bit different instructions. Sometimes they require steam, sometimes they don't. Typically, they don't require steam. And just follow how many seconds they want you to press on each. And don't move your iron around, but just simply lay it on the element and let it adhere. Press it for the amount of seconds that your fusible requests. So for an entire clip, I lost my audio, but what I'm going to do is let you see the video of my cutting out the heart on the line and allowing the excess fuse to remain on the fabric. That just ensures that every part of that heart has fusible on it all the way up to the line. Every element that you cut out needs to have that fuse all the way to and beyond the line that you cut it on to ensure that it fuses properly. And so I'm going to show you a little clipping of me cutting the heart, and then I removed the paper from this heart and all of the elements, and then I'm going to come back and show you how I place them on my block. Okay, so you can see my pile over here of all of the elements that I have cut out. And this is that last heart. It is really quite easy to remove the paper from the back. But if you run into a problem, take a pen, any kind of a pen, and just scratch the paper side, and it will give you a place to hold on to actually remove that paper from your fused fabric. So that's just a trick on removing it. So now what I'm doing with all of my block, I am going to take a look at it and get everything laid on the block the way I want it. I have made creases. I've pressed creases in this block. I folded it in half, and then I folded it in half again. So I've got creases going lengthwise and horizontally. I am going to lay each of my hearts so that these 2 points line up on those creases. And I'm keeping my heart about 3/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. And then I'm placing all of the rest of my elements in there. You'll notice that the pattern itself, it doesn't have the leaves touching the stem, but you can certainly have them touching if you want. This is your block. Have fun with it. So I have placed everything where I want it here. I would recommend when you place your elements, and these have all of the paper removed, when you place your elements, make sure that you do this on your ironing board. It's going to save you hassle of having to rearrange everything by transferring this over to the ironing board. I will have to transfer and rearrange things, but for you, I would just recommend that you do this step at your ironing board. And once you're happy with the placement, if everything looks exactly the way you want it, then and only then you can press. And press each element based upon the instructions for your fusible web. And then we're ready to applique. So let me get my block over to the ironing board, get it pressed, and then I'm going to set up my machine for applique. So I'm setting up my machine. I'm going to put the gray thread in first. Since there's a lot of gray elements, I want to get those all secured down first. And I have put the thread in, and I've also put in an embroidery or applique foot. It has a wide spot there because I'm going to do kind of a fancy stitch around the hearts. I'm probably just going to do a zigzag or something like that around these gray elements. Let me check to see what I have available here on this machine and decide what I'm going to use, and then I'll show you here. So I've decided for the stem and this portion right under the flower bud, I'm just going to use a straight stitch, an edge stitch, and I'm going to applique as close as possible to the edge of these elements. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in fast motion for you, and I'll be right back. I've decided to stitch a blanket stitch around my leaves. So I'm going to start that right here and just identify, whoops, I need to restart. Need to make sure that my needle on the right side is right on the edge. So there is a stitch or two that I will be removing later, but I started over and I'm now right on the edge. I did reduce the length of that zigzag stitch for this blanket stitch to a 2.5. So it's 2.5 wide, 2.5 long. Or 2.5 wide, 2.5 long. And again, because I'm using a gray thread, I'm not really going to be able to see it very much, and that's okay. It blends in with the fabric itself. Now let me get this cut and I'll show you. Again, there are a couple of stitches that I will be removing from the front, but there it is. And it's really pretty hard to actually see the stitching. It blends in really well. Now I'm going to continue with all of these leaves and the centers in the gray, and then I'm going to load my pink thread for my buds, and then the last thing I'm going to do is my hearts, and I'm going to do a fancy stitch around the hearts. I'll show you that as well. So I have finished appliquing this one heart using a lacy stitch on my machine, and it's really kind of hard for you to see it. Maybe you can identify it there. It's just a row of hearts, and one of the hearts faces the inside, the other heart faces the outside, and just got a curvy line. It's just a lacy stitch that I found on my machine. It would definitely be much more visible if I had used contrasting thread, but I used a variegated pink and white thread, so it just really blends in with the heart itself. But it does give it a lacy effect, and so that's what I'm going to use to attach my 4 hearts on this block. So here is the finished block. It has been appliqued on to the background, and now it is ready to be used in the quilt that I will be helping you to put together on this coming Friday. So make sure you stop back on Friday. We're going to be using the Bachelor in Love blocks. We're going to need 8 of those, and this one block here that we've just created, the hearts and flowers for the center. And we'll put this beautiful quilt together. With that pattern, I'll also give you on Friday the yardage and that you're going to need for border and so forth. But
thank you so much for watching today. I sure hope you enjoyed putting together a new quilt using the Tulip template and your Bachelor puzzle blocks, as well as maybe the heart blocks. I'm anxious to see what you have constructed with all of your scraps. If you're interested in taking a look at my series of books, I do have the Scrappy Techniques book, plus the Patterns book, which you see over my shoulder here. That's out on my website. I'll have a link for that so that you can take a look at that as well. If you do like the content that I provide for you, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment. I love to read comments from my viewers. It's fun to be able to chat with you all. So until next time, happy quilting and enjoy using up your scraps, making beautiful quilts.